So now that you've practiced adding and subtracting, let's say integers with a little bit of some decimals in there, now I wanted to make a separate video on adding, subtracting fractions, just because it can be a bit of a stumbling point for some people. And you're gonna maybe want to even come back to this video when we get to chapter 6 again. But what you have to know is that to add and subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. That is the only rule that you have to remember. Denominator. So only when adding and subtracting do you need a common denominator. I'm saying it like this because as soon as we move on to multiplication and division, you do not need a common denominator. So only when you're adding. So for example, if you have 1/5 and you're adding 2/5, you're allowed to say, hey, how many fifths do I have? So when you're adding and subtracting fractions, if you have a common denominator, you can simply add the numerators. So this is going to be 1 plus 2 over 5, so 3/5, right? I had 1/5, I'm adding to it 2 more fifths. Whereas if I go to this next question and I'm saying, okay, I have 1/3 and I'm adding to it 3/5, I don't have a common denominator. I can't say that I have a certain number of thirds or I have a certain number of fifths. Okay, so what you would do is create a common denominator. How do you do that? Well, you look at the 3 and the 5 and you find a common multiple. So I take the 5 and I start multiplying by 1. Okay, 3 doesn't go into 5. So I multiply by 2. So 10. 3 doesn't go into 10. So I multiply by 3. 15. 3 goes into 15. Okay, so my common denominator is going to be 15. So both of these are going to get a denominator of 15. To get that, I'm going to multiply, I don't know why I'm doing the right fraction first, but to do that, I'm going to have to multiply 5 by 3. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Now I'm allowed to multiply this fraction by 3 over 3 because I'm really just multiplying by 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So multiplying anything by 1 doesn't change its identity. And so it's allowed in math, because one of the hardest things in math is knowing when and why you can do things. So for this fraction, again, I want to make that common denominator 15, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 5. So I'm going to end up with 5 times 1 is 5 over 15, and 3 times 3 is 9 over 15. Now that I have that common denominator, I can do 5 plus 9, which gives me 14 fifteenths. Then we're going to go over here and we're going to practice subtraction. So again, we're starting with one that has a common denominator of 8. So once you have a common denominator, you can subtract your numerators. 7 minus 3, which is 4. Now, is that a good final answer? No. Everything in math has to be written in its simplest form. And 4/8 is not in its simplest form because there's a common factor in the numerator and the denominator. In other words, if I look at 4 as 4 times 1, and I look at 8 as 4 times 2, right? I could break that up and say, hey, this is 4 over 4 times 1 over 2, and it would give me the same answer. Okay, I know it's hard. They always do things in such weird orders that you have to kind of know some things like multiplying before we do this. But anyway, what we can do is say, hey, we took out a common factor of 4, and since 4 divided by 4 is 1, then I can take out that common factor of 4 top and bottom and be left with 1/2. So 4/8 and 1/2 are equal. So always leave your answers in simplified form. All right, so I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to give this one a go. So the first thing you want to do is create that common denominator. So I look at 7/14 and I know that I can multiply 7 by 2 to get 14. So I don't have to multiply this fraction by anything. I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2 over 2 and get 6 over 14. This guy will stay 2 over 14. And again, I have a common denominator, so I can subtract my numerators. 2 minus 6, or 2 plus -6, is -4 over 14. And again, I didn't give myself enough room for these, so I'm going to go like this. So what I'm going to do is look for a common factor. So something that multiplies into both 4 and 14, which I know is 2. So 2 times -2 is -4, and 2 times 7 is 14. So now I can take out that common factor of 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and I can be left with -2 over 7. All right. Hopefully when you pause the video, maybe you kept going. So if not, feel free to do these. The one thing that I will say, it's funny I put it later in the video, is that see how these have the negatives out front? Okay, it doesn't matter whether a fraction is written as -5/6 with the negative out front, or -5/6 with the negative in the numerator, or even 5 over -6 with the negative in the denominator. Those are all equal. So what I recommend doing with these first is sometimes writing them as fractions with the negative in the numerator. So negative 5/6 plus negative 1/3. It just makes life easier and you kind of know what to do with the sign as you go. So for this one, we're going to create a common denominator. I'm going to multiply this guy by 2/2. I get negative 5/6 plus negative 2/6. Now that I have that common denominator, I could do negative 5 plus negative 2, which gives me negative 7/6. Kind of messed up my whole spacing thing here. I like it when everything flows down to the answer, but that's okay. All right, let's look at this one. So again, I want to create a common denominator. So looking at 7 and 3, I would take multiples of 7. So 7 times 2 is 14, 3 doesn't go in. 7 times 3 is 21, 3 goes in. So I'm going to create a common denominator of 21. To get that, I'm going to multiply this first fraction by 3/3, which gives me negative 12/21. And I'm going to multiply this fraction by 7/7, which gives me 14/21. Then, since I have that common denominator, I can do negative 12 plus 14/21, which gives me 2/21. And that is fully simplified. One thing I didn't mention, and I don't know if you were questioning it, but see how this answer is negative 7/6. You do not ever in Math 50 have to change that to a mixed fraction. So don't worry that that could be negative 1 1/6. Your answer in your back of your book, watch me be wrong, but every textbook I've worked with at the Math 50 level, they leave everything as improper fractions. Now I'm all worried. I might check before I leave this video. Okay, if you haven't paused yet, please pause now and give this one a try. All right, so we got 6 and 8, so I'm going to take the 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Nope. 8 times 3 is 24. Yep, they both go into 24. So I'm going to go 24 for both. At the same time, I'm going to go minus minus. I'm going to say this is a plus over 24. You could have done that at a later stage, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to multiply this guy by 4/4, which is going to give me 20/24. I'm going to multiply this one by 3/3, and that gives me 9/24. Now I can add my numerators now that I have a common denominator. And if you don't like this step, feel free to not do it. And I get 29/24. Now, out of curiosity, I paused the video and checked in the back of the book. Most times they just leave it like that. In one case, I saw that they put or 1 and 5/24. But don't ever feel like you have to do that. 29/24, as long as it's simplified as far as it can go, is a perfectly valid answer. All right, have fun adding and subtracting fractions.